you, ma'am. We'll talk about sponsor tonight. It says a good sponsor will always allow you to see the hope inside yourself. It's the whole object of having a sponsor. It's not just somebody to do your inventory to. It's not just somebody to hang in the side. It's someone who's going to constantly give you hope. That's the thing. It's built off of principle 4, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Happy are the pure at heart, Matthew 5:8. It's also step 4. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Lamentations 3:40. Some of the stuff I'm going to say tonight is going to be on your paper. Some of the stuff isn't. Sponsors, one of those lessons that I really take to heart, because I think this is the most important step of them all. It's getting the right people in your life. Last month, we talked about the importance of having a personal relationship with Jesus, which you found whenever you made the decision to turn your life and your will and your care over to God. Now you see that the road is not meant to be traveled alone. You will find that you actually need 3 relationships. The most important is with Jesus, but in addition, you need a relationship with your village that I'm always saying you need to build, and you need a relationship with your safe people. That's where we're going to start to get into sponsoring that. In recovery, we call our safe people sponsors. But in church on Sundays, we call them the prayer team. They both help you work on getting right with God, yourself, and others. And with the prayer team, you go to the altar and you got to take the alterations. It's the same with your sponsor. You have to be open-minded and you have to take some of the things that they'll throw at you. You know, we talk a lot about cleaning out our closets, and it's mainly to see all those dry, dusty bones in there. And once we start moving them around, they start to rattle a little bit. But once we get them starting to move, we can finally put them to rest. You know, Matthew 6:6 tells us when you pray, you should go into your private room and close the door and pray to the Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. See, a private room, that's where you keep all your baggage. That's your closet. Once we start to clean out that closet, now you can start to use that closet for your quiet time, for your Jesus time, for your prayer, your devotional time. It gives you a place to where you can go. But you need someone you can trust. Here at CR, we call them sponsors. Get out into the world, they call them therapists. And it's okay to have Jesus and a therapist. I tell a lot of people that, because a lot of times, a lot of us, especially with substance abuse or even alcoholism, whenever we start to detox and we start to come clean, we're prescribed medication because there's actually an imbalance. That's what made us do what we did in the first place. So if a doctor gives you medication and it helps you keep your sanity, don't ever think twice, oh, I'm relapsing. As long as you're not abusing it, you take it. Whenever I kind of looked over this, and this is some of the questions that we normally get as sponsors. A lot of people want to know why they need a sponsor in the first place. And whenever people ask me that, I say, well, how's doing things on your own working out for you? And they just stare at me, you know, and they want to know, well, what do I need to look in a sponsor? What are some of the qualities? I tell them, I say, well, what do you need? You know, do you want guidance? Do you want an open ear? You want a shoulder to cry on? You need to match your needs with what they offer. Some people have a lot of time on their hands and they can talk a lot. If that's what you need, then that's who you need to seek out. You know, what does a sponsor do? 2 words: support you. That's it. They should never give you an ultimatum. And I've heard people say that, well, if you do that. No, that's what got you here in the first place. People saying, if you do that. You know, I've corrected a couple of people and I've gotten some mean eyes. It's like, no, you don't just go up to someone and say, well, if you do that, I'm done with you. Being a sponsor isn't as easy. So how do you find one? I tell everybody, open up your eyes and your ears. Listen at the small groups. Pay attention to who these people are that you see week to week, even at church. I've had pastors sponsor people. I've had deacons sponsor people. It's not for me to tell you who's going to sponsor you. Yes, normally you want a curriculum. Yes, you want them to do this. But if someone says, Brian, I want our pastor to sponsor me, who am I to say that man of God can't walk with you, you know? So you got to kind of open up, and you got to kind of to look around. Last year also, they probably still do it. I haven't been on one in a while, but Celebrate Recovery, they do a Facebook Live. And Johnny Baker and his wife Jenny, who oversee all the Celebrate Recoveries, do this. And they were like, hey, if you have a question, type. So I type. I have a person in CR who's been in AA and been in NA. They have the same sponsor for both. They want to get right with Jesus. They want to do Celebrate Recovery. Can they keep that sponsor? This is what he told me. He said, as long as that person is a believer, willing to support the different way that CR works, because CR is a little bit different, and has no problem from popping in time to time, he saw no problems with that. He said, whoever is running the STEP study, let them decide that. Because even though you may have a sponsor, whoever's running that STEP study, it's not just them sitting there listening to your stuff. It's them to see if there's any growth. And if you're not getting any growth, it's also their responsibility to kind of try to figure out why you're not getting that growth. And sometimes it could be a clash of programs. AA has a way of doing it, and CR has a way of doing it. I've been told that a lot. What's the difference between a sponsor and my accountability people that I build around me? I tell them, one's a coach, one's your cheerleading team. You know, your sponsor's normally the one there with you throughout the whole thing. So why do you need a sponsor? And I say sponsor a lot, but it's basically a safe person, someone to do life with. And there's basically 3 reasons, because having a sponsor is biblical. Ecclesiastes tells us that 2 are better off than 1, because together they can work more effectively. If one falls off, the other can reach down and help them up. But if one is alone and there's no one to help him, he's going to be in a problem. 2 people can resist an attack that would defeat one person alone. Where 2 or more gather, Christ is with us. That's why we need 2 people. Proverbs also tells us that iron sharpens iron. One person sharpens another. But you do need to be careful, because David had his Jonathan. Don't be Job and have his friends, because that does happen. You know, you need to find somebody who's going to be willing to meet you where you are. You know, you got to find that sister. You got to find that brother. You got to find that person that you know is not going to judge you. It's going to accept you, because they know who you are now. They don't care who you were. They know who you are now. Having a sponsor is key inside your recovery program. There's 4 elements in this, and you have to really work on all of them. The first one is honesty. Honesty is the best policy. If you cannot be honest with yourself, you're not going to be honest with anybody else. If you can't be honest with yourself, you're not being honest with God. He already knows what you did. You might as well just say, yeah, I did it, and this is what I learned, God. Because the whole goal of any program, and it doesn't matter if it's a Celebrate Recovery program, if it's what did I do? It was a spiritual healing program. It doesn't matter. The end goal of that program is to get you to Jesus so that He can do the work on you. We are just guides to the cross. That's all we do. We talk of steps in recovery, and even though all of them are important, this is the most important one. It's taking what you're fighting up to the altar, surrendering it to Jesus, and saying, Chan, here, I'm tired. Tried everything. Nothing is working. That's where a sponsor can help you do that, you know. And I tell everybody, you don't have to be here on a Sunday. It doesn't have to be in a big fancy building either. I've talked to people in Walmart, you know, and it just man, you know, your shirt, when I have my CR shirt on, something as simple as that. You know, if your heart is being pulled to ever tell somebody, do it. You might get a weird look, but it's the whole object of being obedient to God. And don't ever think that you need someone else's prayers. Everybody's prayers is equal in God's eyes. Your prayers is just as powerful as mine or Joe's or Pastor Lane's. God listens to all of our prayers. The second one is being accountable. You know, some people need these meetings, and I get that. But the ones that really need this, it's always important for them to find somebody that'll hold them accountable to coming. It doesn't mean that they can bark orders at you like a drill sergeant either. I tell a lot of people, if I'm not seeing you here on Tuesdays, but I'm starting to see you on Sundays, the job's over with. That's the goal, is to get you in that sanctuary, not to put you in a program for the rest of your life. But we do have to have some ground rules, just like you would any other relationships. You have to agree that you can have a conversation and it's not going to have any conflicts. Words have to be used instead of feelings. No secrets can be kept from one another. And I know it's hard whenever you relapse or whatever. You don't want to talk about that, but you can't hold your secrets from people. You have to be telling them, look, I screwed up. I know I did. This is what I learned. I know. But let's move forward. They should never just sit you down and just beat you, because the past is what got you here in the first place. And people that did that in the past, you don't want no more of them in your life anymore. Number 3, I have Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I preach Jesus. I believe in healing. I don't believe in us just in recovery our whole life. I believe in healing. But maintaining your devotional time with Jesus through prayer, meditation, studying God's word, those are ground rules that's non-negotiable with me. Even if I have to call you and we have to go over the daily verse together. You can't start your car without unlocking the door. And we all see it on Facebook. Jesus is knocking. Are you going to let him in? If he's knocking, you have to open your door in order to get in. But the weird thing is, when he comes inside, he's not going to sit down and condemn you. He's going to have dinner with you. We see that throughout the Bible. He ate with sinners. So it doesn't matter if your struggle is with drugs, alcohol, depression, codependency, anxiety, grief, or whatever else you want to call off that heart every time. Jesus heals that. He healed Peter's mother-in-law, the woman with blood issues, paraplegics, the blind, the deaf. He raised Lazarus from the grave. And he even healed a centurion's ear when it was cut off, and he was the guy arresting him. Jesus heals. He doesn't care about anything you're doing. And the last part is you have to be able to find success. Any 12-step program is there to show you that change is possible. It will show you that you taking baby steps is a lot more important than a full-on sprint to the end. At some point, though, you should understand that a program was the tool, and don't ever let it become your idol. I have so many people, it's like, oh, I have to go to AA, I have to go to CR, and it's like, why? Oh, because I just have to. It's become an idol to them. And we don't ever want to put a program above God or above Jesus. You don't take away one ball and chain of you're fighting your depression to turn around and latch yourself onto 4 books. Well, now it's what? Yeah, it's 4 books now. All eight books are now in the 4, and you just don't want to drag them books around with you all the time. Jesus gives you freedom. And once you get to that point, start giving back. Start helping others by telling them what steps you took and where you are. Serving others could be as simple as a phone call, text message, or even a like on a Facebook post. Sometimes I'll just like a post, and then all of a sudden I get a text. Hey, dude, been thinking of you. There's a reason I like that post. I don't know, but it started that conversation. And something as simple as that, it can brighten up their day. Having a sponsor and other people around you is the best guard against relapse. And this is where I get in trouble right here. But relapse is a harsh word, and I don't think it's understood. A lot of people think, oh, I drank a beer, I relapsed. No, you had a lapse. You had a momentary lapse of reasoning at that point. Now, you disappeared for 2 months, and you drank for 2 months? Yeah, I would say that's a full-blown relapse. But a lot of people, and it's like, oh, I got to start all over. Why? You had one moment of weakness. As long as you learn from that moment, next time I get here, I need to pick up the phone, you're good. Because to me, a relapse is just totally giving up on things. It's calling it quits. It's saying, I'm done. I'm not going back to AA. I'm not going to CR. I'm not going to church. Don't call me. Don't look at me. And I've been there. I've told a lot of people that I don't like you right now. Don't call me ever again. Some of them never have. But it normally takes you to reach out that one time because somebody never wants to just intervene and overstep. You know, because if I haven't heard from someone in a long time and I call them up and the first words out of my mouth is what you did, that's not what Jesus did. No, Jesus healed you and then said, go forth and sin no more. So that's how we should be as sponsors and especially accountability partners. If someone calls you up and they did something, no, you're good. Let's go forward with it. Because whenever you really start to look at the differences between the two, you can see that guilt, shame, and disgust cannot build up to a point to where it stops you from continuing the search to be a better person. And that person is who we see. You know, I do a thing when we did inventory last year where somebody was acting like they were writing their inventory on a sticky note. And I stuck that note to my forehead. And I was like, you see, I don't see you. I see you. You know, that's the type of relationships you need to start to build. You know, a safe person or a sponsor can help keep you on track. They can see them old ways popping up. Sherry knows my triggers, and sometimes she'll just let me rant. And then 2 days later, I'll say, yeah, I'm going to do this. And she, oh, I thought you were just ranting. She told me that the other day. I thought you were just mad. No, I'm beyond mad. I'm changing this right now, today. You know, sponsors and other people that you allow in your circle, they're not there to call you out either. But they're over there to help you see those patterns, those triggers. And they may want to reach out to you and say, hey, man, why don't we go grab a coffee? Why don't we go? I'll go eat hamburger now. Y'all know that. Let's go do something, because they can see where you're about to get. And that's kind of their soft way of doing an intervention without doing an intervention. I used to get scared because I would drive up to a party, see a whole bunch of cars, and I wouldn't get down because that's what I thought was about to go on in there as an intervention for Brian. And I'm like, I ain't got time for that. So, you know, whenever you're walking with someone, I'm not saying you got to be sneaky, but you got to put corn out before you shoot the deer. You know, the deer's got to start to feel safe with you. Ecclesiastes 7:5, it tells us it's better to be criticized by a wise man than praised by a fool. The trouble with most of us is that we would rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism. That hurts right there. To be able to have somebody say, you know what, dude? I just think you're full of it right now. But you know, back in their heart, you know who they are. You know their character. They're really trying to help you by really not saying anything. So what are the qualities of a sponsor? Through good advice lies deep within a counselor's heart. The wise man will draw it out. That's Proverbs 20, verse 5. When you are searching for a sponsor, or your safe people, there's a couple of qualities you need to look for. Does his walk match his talk? Is he living the 8 principles? You know, I've been around long enough to where, and they call it lingo. I know the recovery lingo, you know. But whenever you look at someone, what is their lifestyle? Does their lifestyle match what they're telling you? It's not the object of them reading the Bible and being perfect today, but if they're telling you, you know, I wouldn't go to Downtown Alive, you know, there's going to be a lot of alcohol there, and they know you struggle, and then you see on Facebook them with Downtown Alive and they got a Budweiser. I mean, what is their lifestyle? Just because alcohol isn't their problem, they should still be able to be at that point to be able to stay self-contained enough. Oh, where was I? I went way over my notes. Whenever you're looking for a sponsor, you got to remember you're not looking for a relapse buddy. You're looking for a human, someone who's flawed just as you are. Someone that's not just going to recite the steps and say, I don't need them. You know, a lot of times I go back and I work a step. A lot of times it's when I get really, really mad. I got to go back and I got to look at forgiveness. I got to go back and I got to look at gratitude. Say, hey, yeah, it's bad right now, but look at yesterday, man. Yesterday was so good. So you're looking for someone that can do that. Those steps that you're doing, in the end, should lead to, it should be some form of discipleship. It's not just to know everything front to cover on all these CR books. It's to know that you found a better way of living. Do they have a growing relationship with Jesus? Are they verse grabbers, or do you see them live it? I tell a lot of people, a lot of times, you're probably the only Bible some people will see. You know, people may be able to recite the entire book of James, but if they don't shut their mouth, listen, and they speak in anger, you just better off going to get a bumper sticker to look at every day. At least the bumper sticker is going to say something that means something to you. You know, I used to pick at some of the guys all the time. They would put these K-Love stickers, and they put these little fish stickers, and I love my Jesus and all this and that. And I'm like, dude, you drive like a bat out of hell. I've seen you road rage. How is that helping anyone? You know, you always got to look, and in a sponsor, that's what you're looking at. You know, I once cut off a school bus one day, and I wasn't paying attention, and the bus driver threw his hands, and I threw one finger up, and when he got on the side of me, it was a missionary school. I felt bad, but I was like, he shouldn't have cut me off in the first place. You know, I tried to make excuses, but it showed me right there that even in my weakest moment, instead of me just backing off and picking up the phone, nope, I went back to an old coping skill. My good old friend, my middle finger. And what did that solve? A bunch of kids learned something that day, I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure them kids already knew that. But do they express the desire to help others on this road to recovery? To me, recovery is not about a behavior. It is about not being the same person for the rest of your life. I started CR not to quit a substance. I was clean for many years. I didn't start CR because I didn't have nothing to do on a Friday night. Because I did. I had a lawn service. I could have done better with my time. But I learned that CR helped me recover from being Brian. That was the part of my life that I wasn't ever over. There's a difference between helping others and trying to fix others. And we need to be careful, and we need to guard that sponsorship responsibility from becoming unhealthy and codependent. A lot of times that's what I messed up, but you didn't call me this morning. That's why I tell a lot of people, look, I'll help you, I'll sponsor you, but I'm not going to call you every day and say, good job, you didn't do crack today. You're not supposed to be doing it in the first place. It's not the kind of sponsor I am. Because the first day I'm going to call and not congratulate you, if you relapse, that's how you're going to look at the whole program and walk away. Codependency is the number one reason why people fail or struggle in any program. If someone gets used to that call at 9 o'clock and then I'm tied up at 9 and I don't call, they have an easy way out. And some people look for excuses. I know some people that told me that, I relapsed this weekend. But to be honest, I planned it because I knew all this would fall into play. That sounds weird, but that happens a lot. Codependency can easily be fed, and it goes both ways. Remember, there are some people in recovery, and their addiction is your drama. And I hate to say it like that, but it's the truth. We have a lot of people in recovery that just feed off of people. And they want to hear all your little tidbits. And I tell everybody, if someone talks to you about somebody else, they're talking to someone else about you. You have to be careful because you got to understand there's a lot of broken people. And that goes in the church. That goes anywhere. There's broken people everywhere. Do they show compassion and care, but they don't show pity? That's the hard thing also, because a lot of people, like me, we get a lot of stuff behind, and then it's like, oh man, I feel bad. Look, and I want to treat you for doing something wrong, because there's always that, that's what I wanted, that's what I needed. But you need to be the person that whenever you need to be that person you needed when you needed that person. As simple as that. And it's not a free ticket aboard the pity train either. Recovery is not easy. Grief is, a lot of people, that's mainly what you're dealing with is grief. And a lot of people that's not easy. Loved ones pass and 4 years later, you're still dealing with grief. It's the same with recovery. You quit drinking and you don't have your buddies anymore. You might not want the beer, but you miss that fellowship you had, that bond that you had. Everyone knows this about me, and it's weird. When people ask me and I say permission to speak freely, it's fixing to get deep. You see, as a sponsor, before you go that route, you always got to ask permission. Well, look, I have permission to speak freely right here. Look, just between me and you, I'm not going to hurt you, but I love you. But I always ask. A good sponsor will do that, but he'll always do it in love. He's not going to beat you up, leave you condemned, and say, peace out. He's going to teach you about redemption. He's going to teach you about repentance. There's always a way back to Jesus. There's always a way back to the cross. You know. Next, are they a good listener? Do you sense that he honestly cares about what's going on in your life? The bigger question to that for me is, do they have anything to say? You know, a lot of times I'll just listen. As they say, I listen and we don't judge. That's how I am. I listen and I don't judge. But whenever it's their turn to talk, are they giving you some meat and potatoes or just some cake like what Charlene brought that I'm about to tear up? Just giving you the sweet stuff, the stuff that you're going to like. Or are they really going to make you eat some spinach? They're going to make you eat some broccoli. They're going to tell you something that, you know, you really need to hear. Are they strong enough to confront your denial or your procrastination? That's where I had a problem. I love to procrastinate. I won't put off doing tomorrow what I'll put it off until I forget about it. We were talking on the way up here. I was saying that, you know, I haven't washed my car in 2 years. I said, well, I'm going to wash it after cane season. That was 2 cane seasons ago. I'm looking forward to this year's cane season because I'm going to wash it after cane season. But do they really care enough to challenge you? Or do they just, after you break down and you cry, they just look you in your face and say, well, man, thanks for sharing that with me. That used to aggravate me. Someone is bawling their eyes out. You could tell they need a hug, a donut, or something, prayer or something, and everybody just says thank you for sharing. They don't take time to stop and go pray over that person. You know, we all need that little push. And sometimes whenever you push, there might be a little jolt behind it. But it's being at that point to where you're not scared to walk out and say, hey, dude, look, just let's pray. Let's stop right here and let's pray. Because crying is good. Crying gets it out. But they will never confront you. They will never give you, confronting someone and giving an ultimatum, that is 2 different things. The main thing here is having trust that they will do things out of love and not out of regret. Some people live their recovery through you. And those are normally people those are normally sponsors that have 10,000 sponsees. They're just living their recovery through you. They never really worked on themselves. They got to a point to where they're not doing those things anymore. But they got all these people around to call them up every day, and it makes them feel good because they don't want to put in the hard work. Do they offer suggestions? You see, that gets me in trouble a lot of times. Sometimes we need help in seeing opinions or alternatives that we can't find on our own. You know, it's kind of like whenever you go to the store and you go to check out and they say, oh, how's your day going? And the cashier will tell you that, hey, you having a good day today? That's one thing. Or then you go and they just throw in my bananas. And I'm like, dude, you just bruised all my bananas. You know, there's a huge difference right there. Can they stop and offer a suggestion to you or just stop you right there and say, hey, look, we need to talk right now? Another huge thing, do they share? Do they share their current struggles with you? You know, whenever I do a step study, especially with a bunch of new guys, I always pull out the first book I did my step study in. That's where I did all my heavy digging. Because whenever they're in the middle of their fight, I want them to know, hey, look, this is what I went through when I did this step study. And it ain't sugar-coated, and it's not politically correct, and there's some spicy words in it. Because at that point, that's who Brian was. And I tell them that. I'm going to say some things that are very inappropriate. But once I say those things, I see a sigh of relief because a lot of people are like, dude, that's what I'm going through. That's what I'm feeling. So are they able to do that? You know, a lot of times whenever I give lessons, I talk a lot about what I went through because that's just what CR has taught me to do, to be totally transparent with people and say, yeah, I struggle with this too. Most of this stuff that I wrote here, that's a lot of conviction from me. You know, these are some of the stuff I did. What are the roles of a sponsor? They can be there to discuss issues in details that are too personal or will take up too much time in a meeting. Small group is not a place to dump your whole purse. I used to tell my girls that all the time. This ain't the time to dump your whole purse. Give me the short version. Just pull out your wallet. But let's just dump your coins out, you know, because this isn't the time or the place. That's where you get with your sponsor. Because whenever you get with your sponsor, you're going to have one-on-one, uninterrupted, no other ears. You're going to be more open, and you're actually going to be more logical about it because you're going to be able to control your emotions a lot more. Because I know with men a lot of time, if a man is in a huge group and he starts sharing and he starts crying, it brings out a lot in everybody else. Pretty sure it does the same with the women. It gets your mind clicking and remembering. And maybe that's something you haven't dealt with. I'm not saying you can't share in a small group, but not all things are built for small group. And you always want to be courteous to others because we still know that some people have triggers. The sponsor's role is to model Christ's grace, forgiveness, and to give a sense of perspective, not be perfect. If your sponsor says he's perfect, you got the wrong person. If a person walks up to you and says, hey, I want to be your sponsor, that's a red flag too. It's like, God, you pray. God will help you get there. He's to show you grace. He's to show you forgiveness and just a different perspective. He's going to be or she's going to be as flawed as you are. They're not Jesus. They're just trying to emulate him. And you're not going to get that in small group. You're going to get a little vibe about it's going to turn in. Eventually, you won't want to go to the small group because one person takes up 20 minutes of the whole group. And you see, that's why that's not the place. That's why a sponsor is important, or that saved person. Are they available in times of crisis or potential relapse? I tell everybody, call me before you do anything. But call me afterwards if you didn't call me before, and don't hide about it. I've had people call me up. Say, well, I picked up the phone to call you, and I put it down and I grabbed a beer. I got a 6-pack in me now. Now I'm ready to talk. Okay, at least you called. I always tell them, call me before, but don't hold no guilt or shame. Call me after, because there's not going to be any guilt or shame. That's going to brew inside of you. That's nothing I'm going to give you. Ecclesiastes 4:12 tells us 2 people can resist an attack that would defeat one person alone. Getting over a relapse is harder when your sponsor is just going to beat you up on it. If you confide to anyone about a relapse, all they are to do is to listen. If they get ugly, the Bible tells us, somebody don't receive you, you knock the dust off your feet and you walk. You don't stand there and argue and fight, because it's only going to bring you backwards. You just found out y'all aren't compatible. A sponsor should be able to sound as a sounding board by providing an objective or a different point of view. When it gets deep, where do they go? Do they go to Scripture or do they go to the world? If I'm fighting a divorce and you're fighting a divorce, you're not going to get the best advice from me. If I'm fighting abuse at home and you're fighting abuse at home, probably not going to get the best advice out of me. Because once we start talking about what's going on, I'm not worried about Jesus no more. Now I want you to do to them what I don't have the courage to do to these people. And that happens a lot. So we have to watch that also. They are there to encourage you to work the principles at your own speed. This isn't a race. Tony used to tell me all the time, Brian, you didn't get messed up in a day, bro. You ain't going to get messed up. You ain't going to get fixed in a day. I was like, yeah, I used to get messed up every day. He said, so you see? He said, you had what, about 16 years? I said, yeah. He said, it might take you 20 years to get right. Even though I'm sober, that don't mean nothing. But patience is the main thing. Step studies move fast. And a lot of times you have a lot to talk to, and we might be in lesson sponsor and you haven't dealt with all your denial yet. That's where that sponsor comes in. Where that sponsor can say, hey, where are you going in your step study? Because if you work in a step study and you're keeping your sponsor out the loop, you ain't doing no good. You just sitting, you better off getting a sponsor in the step study. You should be able to sit down and go over everything that you do on that step study with your sponsor. And he should be able to say, okay, look, I know that step study needs to progress because, we can't sit on one subject for a month. It's kind of hard to do. It needs to progress. But let's go back and let's work on some more of this denial. Let's start digging a little bit on this anger. Let's get a little bit more honesty flowing. But most important, they attempt to model the lifestyle that results from working the 8 principles or any steps. It's difficult to inspire others to accomplish what you haven't been willing to do yourself. A good sponsor just doesn't live principles, but they know the red letters. And that's what they try to live. They try to live them red letters. We go over them 8 principles. We go over them 12 steps. The red letters are more important. That's what that should be getting you to. That's what your sponsor should be able to slowly bring you into. Can a sponsor resign or be fired? Both. Both. I've had to tell people, look, it's just not working. We're not melding because we're not going to work. And I've had people tell me, well, if you're not going to call me every day, that's fine. I've fired sponsors. Say, hey, look, dude, it's over. It's not that I got to a point to where I thought I was too good for them. No, it's just I got to a point where I needed more growth. A sponsor is not lifetime. It's not. Because the weird thing is, a lot of people I do step studies with, they have a sponsor when they go in that step study, and a couple of years later they meet someone else and they click better because maybe they both like fishing or hunting. I'm not going. It's early. It's cold. Forget it. But they may click with them. So by them clicking, it's like, hey, I have more in common. I need to fill up a schedule. There was one guy, he was like, when he had like 2 weeks of sobriety. He went up to his sponsor and he was like, hey, what you doing this weekend? He says, well, I'm helping a buddy move. He said, look like I'm helping a buddy move, huh? I mean, he shadowed the guy because he needed that. How do you find sponsors or accountability partners? Like I said in the beginning, look around. They don't even have to be someone in this room. There's other meetings. We're an option. It's kind of like Pastor Lane says. We're not trying to be the biggest church. We're just trying to give an option to other people. Many people have sponsors from AA and NA. And if you're comfortable with them, that's a village. You need to keep your village together. The one thing I do not budge on is the same sex. That's no exceptions. I know I have daughters that I talk to a lot, but that's different when you get to that point. When that relationship goes beyond that and they become part of the family. They got adoption papers. They eat all your food. They go shopping in your pantry. That's no longer a sponsee to sponsor thing. That's a father to daughter thing. But you need to have the same sex because there's things that men will talk to another man about, but they won't even talk to their wife about, and vice versa. There's some things women will talk to other women about. I understand women don't trust women. Men don't trust men. I get that. That's why it's so important to really dig. You may have an addiction to a substance, but you were abused growing up. They may be fighting depression and they were abused growing up. Just because y'all don't have the same the same issue doesn't mean that y'all can't connect, because y'all have something in common right there. If you ask someone to be your sponsor and the person says no, don't take it as a personal rejection. Remember, some people, their recovery still comes first before anything. And I've had to tell people no in the past also. But take that as honesty. Don't take that as someone being negative. I'd rather somebody come up and say, Brian, no, look, I just can't handle it right now, than accept it and bail on me 4 months down the road. I've seen that happen a lot too. Most important though is ask God in prayer. Let Him choose who you need. He knows everyone in the room, everyone you're going to meet, everyone in your past, everybody. If we're going to believe He created everything, then He created someone for you. You need to ask Him. A couple of things about what's the difference between your sponsor and accountability partner. A sponsor has utilized the step studies, has developed a want to be there for someone. Accountability partners, they tend to be people in your small group who can serve as a number two. That's why I say get phone numbers, especially if you're new to a recovery thing. Get phone numbers. Because I had a guy call me. He's like, man, you're the 10th one I called today. You're the only one that answered. I'm thinking, well, I guess God has something for me to tell you. God knows who you need to talk to. That way of 2, 3, you just keep on going down. And he showed me that. He came over that weekend. He's like, you think I'm joking? Look, I called 10 people this weekend. You were the only one that answered. I'm like, well, that's good. But you got the numbers. So there's a lot of things in here tonight that I added. Some of y'all may have never heard before. If you took anything I said and you just don't understand, because sometimes I have a heart, like I said, I take this to heart. And I'm kind of bold about it sometimes because I'm very passionate about it. Just ask me. I've learned one thing in recovery. The only stupid question is the one you never ask. And it's the one thing that you never allow your tongue to say. And that is sponsor. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add before we go into our serenity prayer? I need a drink. All right, then. We'll go into the serenity prayer. It'll take about 10 minutes. Us guys will go outside and the women will stay in here where the cake is. All right, God. The serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. We'll take about 10 minutes.